Here's the truth, Mother said about an hour later. She and Mimi were seated in the front parlor, side by side, on the window seat. Both of them had eyes puffed and red from crying. Emma, Amelie, Brythe, and I hovered outside the room, crushed together behind the narrow right-hand wall of the arched entry, holding our breaths for the fear of being discovered. We all felt guilty about listening in on their private talk, but we had to know what they were saying. Our entire reality had been rocked. Mimi had a different mother. It just didn't seem possible. Your father had a first wife whom he married while doing missionary work on an island of Haiti in the Caribbean. The wife was named Louise, and she was a black Haitian. She died of malaria when you were an infant. Father returned to America with you. My sisters and I looked at each other, our eyes wide with amazement. Father had a first wife, a black wife. You were less than a year old when I married your father. I had known and loved him ever since I was a girl, so the decision was easy for me. You were such a sweet and lovely baby. It was easy to love you as my own. As well, Mother went on, and you are my own daughter, in every way but biology. Why didn't you tell me? Mimi asked quietly. We thought it would be better if you grew up thinking of me as your mother. Your complexion was fair, that it was possible that you were mine by birth. Does anyone else know? Mother shook her head. My parents knew before they passed. Grandmother Taylor never approved of the marriage, so Father didn't tell her about you until after he and I had married and were living in Massachusetts. He was ashamed of me, Mimi deducted sadly. He didn't want her to know that. Here Mother's voice trailed off as though she wasn't sure how to express what she wanted to say. That I'm black, Mimi supplied. Half black. From behind, Brythe tugged on my sleeve. How can she be black when she looks white? She whispered. Shh, I replied sharply. I tried to be quiet, but both Mother and Mimi looked in our direction. Show yourself, ladies, Mother commanded. Sheepishly, we emerged from the hiding place. Then, seized by the overwhelming rush of love from my older sister, I dashed forward and threw my arms around her. Emma, Amelie, Brythe followed my lead. Nothing has changed, I gushed, nothing at all. We clung together, there rocking, a pile of teary-eyed females, consumed by the sisterly love of one another, desperate to assure Mimi that it didn't matter if she was a half-sister. Our love for her was whole, complete, and unconditional. After several minutes of this, we loosened our grips and settled into our own seats, apart yet still sitting close together. It could be our secret, Brythe suggested. No one needs to ever know. An expression of indignation swept across Mimi's face. Why should we keep it a secret? I wouldn't tell anyone if I was black, if I didn't have to, Blythe replied. No one would ever know unless you told them. It might make your life harder if people knew, I said, thinking of only Mimi's happiness. You know how things are in this country. Then maybe I shouldn't live in this country, Mimi countered, a note of anger creeping in her voice. Not live in America? Emma said with a gasp. Where else would you live? How would you even get there? How would we see you? Amelie, too, appeared stricken by the very idea. I don't know yet, Mimi admitted. It was the word yet that struck us with fear. When Mimi set her mind to something, she made it happen. She might not have her mother's blood in her veins, but she had spent her life observing and the mistress of self-actualizing determination, and she learned well. Mother's eyes glistened as she stood. Jane's right, Mimi, she said. Nothing has changed. Mimi nodded in agreement, but I saw something in her eyes, a confusion and distance that had changed already. The rest of the season was a summer of reading. My involvement with Sherlock Holmes grew even deeper as I finished The Hounds of Baskerville, devouring a year's worth of Strand back issues in just weeks. I moved on to The Adventures of the Empty House, The Adventure of the Nordwood Builder, The Adventure of the Dancing Men. I gleaned from my reading, and also from talking to other people in town, that the character of Holmes had been killed off back in 1893, but the demand for the sharp-witted detective was so great that he had to be revived. Given my circumstances in Spearville, where the dead routinely return, this did not strike me as odd. Emma and Amelie were also engrossed in reading. They would sit side by side and read The Ways of the Eagle, a new romance by Ethel M. Dell. Blythe was sobbing her own contently through Anne of Anova, a sequel to her favorite Anne of Green Gables. For her part, Mother had discovered a treasure trove of back issues in the library as well. Borderlands was a quarterly newsletter that had been published in Britain by the famous journalist W.T. Stead. He had made his reputation as the straight-ahead reporter who had come to believe in contact with the spirit world. He was also a psychic who made predictions of the future. In Borderland, W.T. Stead spoke about his spirit guide, a young woman named Julia. Julia had warned Steed to be wary of ice, so he rarely went out in winter, fearing that he would slip and die by hitting his head. By the time Mother read every single issue of Borderland, she discovered Steed had misunderstood Julia. The threat, she was sure from reading Julia's words, was that Steed might freeze to death, not that he would slip. She sent him a lengthy letter stating why she felt this way, and was thrown into a state of near delirious joy when she received a response. From that moment on, Mother adored W.T. Steed as much as she revered the Fox sisters. After the Haitian couple left, Mimi no longer wanted to work with Aunt Lily at the hotel. "It's too much like being a maid," was her only explanation. But it wasn't hard to tell what was on Mimi's mind from her reading list. She put her head into narratives of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, and she hardly took it out all throughout July. By the end of August, she was into brand new works by Booker T. Washington, My Larger Education. She went into the collection of essays that had been published in 1903, called The Souls of the Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. One hot, early September afternoon, while we were both reading on the porch, she lifted her head to me. Du Bois says, "The problem with the 20th century is the problem of the color line." "But it's not a problem here," I point out. "Spearville has been an active abolitionist town, just as it was now full of sympathy for the women's movement. Frederick Douglass was even visited 17 years earlier in 1894 with his second wife, a radical white feminist named Eva Pitts. They both spoke at the town center, and their speeches had been met with the warmest applause. It was a fact of which the town was very proud. That was fine that this town isn't racist. But I won't be staying here forever," Mimi stated in a very calm firmness. "Well, me neither," I agreed, uncertain. I was determined to go at the first chance, but where to and how was I going to accomplish this was still a mystery. Plus, I wasn't really ready to wrench myself away from my mother and sisters, or even from this town itself, truth be told. Weird though it was still the only home I knew. "That reminds me," Mimi said, and she took a torn-out square of newspaper from the back of the Souls of Black Folk. "This morning I found this item in the paper one of Mother's clients left on the porch. You weren't around, so I tore it out and stuck it in my book. I can't believe I nearly forgot to give it to you." I read over the advertisement she handed me. It was a notice of a journalism contest sponsored by the Sun. The winner would receive $500 and an internship at the Sun, complete with board at the home of the family of impeccable repute. Mimi and I looked at each other, bursting with possibility. "But Mother would never let me go, even if I did win," I pointed out. "I'd go with you," Mimi said. "You would?" She nodded vigorously. "Think of the fun we'd have on our own in New York City. And there are all sorts of different people in the city. Black, white, people of all shades. I could discover how I want to deal with this new news about my heritage. Not telling anyone just seems so wrong. It's detestable, inauthentic. What could you do differently in the city?" I asked. "In a city like New York, I could figure things out. I could tell people who I really am. Maybe get to know other black people. I suppose, I conceded. I didn't really understand why she couldn't go on as she was. But I wasn't in her shoes. I couldn't feel it as she did. You're a great writer, Jane. You say you want to write for the newspaper someday. You have to enter this contest. I know you can win, Mimi insisted. You don't want either of us to stay in this town forever. Her confidence was contagious, but I still wasn't sure. Did I have the nerve to try for this? Was I really good enough? I've been waiting to write an article about Tesla, I admitted to Mimi, but I need to interview him. I have no idea where to find him. He's not in Houston Street anymore, and I read from he had a Fifth Avenue lab, but it also burnt down. His project on Long Island is closed. Mimi's eyes lit with excitement. I can't believe this. I know where he is. It was meant to be. How do you know? Mimi got to her feet. The sun is still on the porch of the table, held from a blown off by a rock. She retrieved it and paged through until she found an article she sought in the society pages. She handed it to me with a triumphant smile. The photo showed Tesla inside eating alone at a round table in a gorgeous dining room complete with high windows and an enormous lavish bouquet of shining porcelain flowers. The mention of Tesla in a gossipy article was very short, and I scanned it quickly. September 1911, scientist and inventor Nikola Tesla was spotted looking dapper but dining solo at the world's tallest hotel in swanky Wolf Astoria on the 34th Street, New York City today. The creator of the Tesla coil and famed rival of Thomas Edison had lived in the Waldorf Astoria for some years now. It's rumored that despite several recent crushing financial setbacks, the eccentric genius is able to afford such posh digs due to his long-standing friendship with his occasional financial backer, the hotel's co-owner and the world's richest man, John Jacob Astor. The two men met back in 1893 at the Chicago's World's Fair and have been fast friends ever since. I gazed at Mimi blankly. What good was this information when he was hundreds of miles away? I couldn't even get a letter to him on time, I pointed out. This town is so backwards, it doesn't even have phone service yet, she said. Even if we call him at the hotel from Buffalo, what would we say? You're right. I'm sure he wouldn't never remember us. That's why we have to go and talk to him as he leaves the hotel or has a meal at the dining room, she said, as if it should have been obvious. Go there? Has she lost her mind? She hooked her arm through mine peremptorily. We have to leave immediately. I have some money saved from working at the Spirit. Do you have any? Yes, but Mother will never let us go off to New York City on our own, I reminded her. I know. That's why we're not going to tell her.